had fantasy applications, and it was the book that wasn't there. And like I said, we did the 196, printed 250 copies, sold 170. Did not include the St. Louis Cardinals. I'd like to tell you that that's somebody who's been fired, but it was me. And it was just, I left them out. I printed them out and didn't give them to the printer. Sent them out on the Saturday before opening day. Monday, I get a call from Gary. Joe, great book. Live, by the way, it looks terrible. Shame about the Cardinals. What? You left the Cardinals out. I did what? So Bud Selig got the idea for contraction from us. We were doing it 5 years before anyone else. But the miracle was we got to do a second book. People loved it. There's nothing else out there like it. The writing, people like Christina and Ryan Gisarelli, just these really phenomenal analysts and writers. They're doing the best they could with the material. In 97, 98, we sold a few more copies and picked up a publisher in 99, worked in press. Brassey's Publishing, moved to a different publisher in, I'm going to get the chronology wrong, but roughly 2001. And then now we're with Plume as of 2006.
Yes.
Steven's been in the room 5 years, I've been in the room 15, I don't know anything. And like I say, it's created opportunities where instead of basically sending out copies to radio stations and hoping, I still remember my first radio gig in 96 with Jim Gott and I don't even know who else in Los Angeles. And now we have people like Barry mispronounced the name, Pomponio at Plume, setting up events like this where we get to come and talk to baseball fans, talk to college students, talk to readers around the country. We do a ton of media. It's really something to see how it's progressed. Steve makes the point about being in a room with people like Christina and Will who have all these different expertises in all these different parts of baseball. It's not just that. It's all these different expertises in all walks of life. If I wanted to buy a flat screen a couple weeks back, I just threw out a note to the group. Hey, what do you guys know about HDTV? 700 emails. If I wanted to know, hey guys, I just was getting a hankering to talk about the Crimean War. Anybody? Anybody? He and Christina would go off for an hour and a half. Clay Davenport's a meteorologist. So sometimes I'll just call him up and ask him for the weather report. What else we got? Nate Silver was more of an NBA type. He was with KPMG for a while, which I don't think exists anymore. Thank you. I'm a dumb journalism major, and now that I work in sports, I really don't have to care about the rest of the world. I'm surprised to see that Bill Clinton's running for president again. I didn't. That was the short one. This is an amazing group of people. It really is. One of the big, not to get all, I'm 37 and you're not on you, but the biggest lesson you can take from Baseball Prospectus is don't be afraid to be the dumbest guy in the room. If you're the dumbest guy in the room, you're probably going to do pretty well. If you're all smart people, and if you surround yourself by people smarter than yourself, you can do things like take over a room at Northeastern University for an afternoon and tell dumb jokes. To bring it back to baseball, I want to ask a couple questions here. There's a lot of different hats, which we're attributing to the fact that Northeastern attracts students from around the country. So just show of hands. Red Sox? Box on all your houses. Yankees? Mets? Yeah. Other? Cubs? Turn your hat around, sir. A's? Was there another A's? There we go. Come on. Wear the colors, Brad. You'll get back to things in 2010. Right here. Nationals? Yeah. You get down to see the new park?
Yeah.
Who else had their hands up? Another A's fan right here. Wow. Billy Bean would be proud. Tigers? It'll be a good year for you guys.
Giants.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
What do you get when you take 71 to a team and remove its best player? Pretty much. It's a beautiful ballpark, though. And I love the Orlando Cepeda, the bowls.
Yeah.
Anybody been to 3Com AT&T Park out there? Get the bowl, chicken and rice.
Cha-Cha Bowl, baby.
Cha-Cha Bowl? Thank you.
They're delicious.
Cha-Cha Bowl, not mentioned in Baseball Prospectus 2008 workout. Actually, I would love, that would be a feature. It's been done, but I think it'd be fun to come up with something goofy like value over replacement food. And just do the best dish at each ballpark and put them on a scale. Like Dodger dogs would be somewhere in the middle. Yankee Stadium's food would be somewhere below every AAA park. Shea Stadium just would be its own category called inedible. But what park is this? Hamden? The Boots?
Yeah.
Hamden for Boots. I love the sausages outside of Fenway. Those really ridiculous rolls.
Was it Ichiro's in Seattle?
Sushi. That's the thing people hate on it. You get these like 55-year-old sports writers. They can't believe they sell sushi at ballparks. You know, it's not like they had to walk uphill both ways in the snow to cover games. Any of you want to have a career in sports journalism? One. If there's any way you can do it without becoming a beat writer, which is the world's most soul-crushing job, and I say that having been around these people, a press box is the worst place in the world to watch a baseball game. They hate baseball. Like my wife, they root for outs. That is the whole point. The game is what happens. The game is what happens between the pregame quotes and the postgame quotes. And what actually is happening it's not no cheering in the press box. There's no paying attention in the press box. So if you do become a sports writer, God bless you, do it the best way you can. But try to retain, if you're doing it because you love sports, try to hold on to that because for the most part, these people don't like the game. And it's reflected in the coverage. And I think one of the key differences between Prospectus and a lot of the other, I won't say the books, but certainly the coverage of the game, magazine, web, newspapers, is that we love baseball. This group of people absolutely loves baseball. And I think we try to bring that through. And people say we're critical and we're mean and we're sarcastic, and we are all of these things in our personal lives as well. But what we think that we always come to it is that, this is people who love the game, writing about the game. How many people actually have already bought the book? Thank you. How many people are going to buy it today? How many people have not raised their hand to either question? Blanket party, these two guys. You guys know what a blanket party is?
Yes.
I like this guy. Website. How many people read the website? Thank you very much. Thank you very much. How many people have heard of the World Wide Web? Go home tonight, baseballprospectus.com. It is, a chunk of stuff is free. There is subscription stuff. The free stuff alone, you'll love it. Check it out. If you end up wanting to buy a subscription, great. Contact me through the website. And if you go to the site, and typically Will Carroll will be more organized than I will. He'll have like little cards or stuff. Here's the thing. If you're here today, go to the website, find an article by me, email me, say you were here. We'll get you set up for a month free. You can try it out. So just go ahead and do that. I know that's a long way to go, but trust me, you'll find it's worth it. Especially this month. Everybody's getting pumped for the upcoming season. We'll have a lot of preview material. Got all the stats on the site. Try it out for a month. You'll be the person who came to the Northeastern thing and it changed their life. Or maybe slightly less than that.
I was thinking about the food at Yankee Stadium. There's in addition to the stuff they sell people on the field, there's a press dining room. And there's always this very sort of prototypically Darwinian moment where, because if you go to cover a night game, the sort of the typical schedule, at least until this year, I don't know how it will be under Joe Girardi, but under Joe Torre, the clubhouse opened about 4 o'clock. You mill around for a while. If you want to do an interview with somebody, if people are available, because usually the players hide. They don't want to talk, particularly in New York. It might be a little different in Kansas City where there might be 2 beat writers traveling with the team, but in New York it's more like 50 guys plus Japanese media plus television plus radio, and I think they just feel overwhelmed. So they tend to either hide in the manager's office where you're not allowed to go, or the bathroom where you wouldn't want to go, because you might see somebody injecting somebody else with something. It could be socially awkward. At about, say, 5:30, Joe Torre will come out and lead everybody to the dugout to do his pregame press conference, where he intentionally speaks very, very quietly. And if you've listened to as much rock and roll music as I have on headphones, you can't hear a word that he's saying. And you've got the trains passing by and planes, and they say, like, what's Jeter's availability for tonight? The guys are writing down. What? Once he's done, it's about 6 o'clock. The game doesn't start till 7:10, so you've got an hour to kill. And typically, this is where everybody goes into the press dining room and has dinner. And you would have a certain expectation of ballpark food, and it's very much like a high school cafeteria. There are like these ladies that they've imprisoned in the basement, who they take a receipt for you put down I think $10, and then they give you a receipt. You hand it to this lady behind this small cell-like window, and they hand you back a plate. And like, what comes back? It's like shrimp scampi. And there's this survival moment where you think, am I going to eat shrimp scampi in the basement of Yankee Stadium, the Bronx, where I have just no proof how long this has been here. This could be Babe Ruth's shrimp scampi. So that's a bit scary. But one of my all-time favorite Yankee stories, which has really nothing to do with the team, but one of my close friends worked there for many years and was in this line for the press dining room. The employees can eat there too on game nights. Certain Yankee Stadium employees are forced to go to the games, whether they're game day employees or not. And he was one of them. And the dish was like turkey with yams or something. And my friend said, yeah, "Hold the yams." And this voice behind him says, "You don't like yams?" And he turns around, it's Joe Torre. And he said, "No, Joe, I don't like yams." And Torre said, "But yams are good for you." And he said, "No, I just don't like them." He said, "They've got a lot of vitamins." I said, "Joe, would you like my yams?" He said, "No, I'm going to get my own yams." Okay, Joe, we'll agree to disagree about that. But those are the kind of the surreal things that can happen. There was another point I was going to make before I got off in the wonderful world of.
The story was better than any point.
Oh, yeah, I should maybe quit while I'm ahead, but if I am ahead. But I mean, these are kind of the weird things. But no, the one point that Joe made about beat writers and the difference between what we do with beat writers, and he's heard me say this probably about 8 times on this tour, but a really revelatory moment for me was sitting in the Yankee Stadium press box, and it's terraced, so like there's sort of a back row where they stick people like me, and then the next row down is the media that they like a little better than internet guys, and then the front row is like the New York Times and stuff like that. And so you can, if you lean down as you're looking towards the field, you can kind of see the computer monitors of the people as the rows march down towards the field. And it was probably about 2002, somewhere around there. I was in the press box, and Andy Pettitte was on the mound, and Roger Clemens was going to pitch the next day. And while this game was happening in front of us, the reporter in the row below me was writing his lead for tomorrow. And this was a Saturday, and he was writing Dateline Sunday and saying, Roger Clemens did not pitch well badly on this beautiful rainy, and he just was going to point and click and erase the parts that no longer applied once the game had happened. And I understand that these people are on very tight deadlines, that they have to do awesome feats of endurance to cover 162 games a year. The hours are ridiculously bad, but it just seemed to me to be like all you really need to do is drop the cubicle around the guy, and he would be doing exactly the kind of thing that he probably thought he wasn't doing by becoming a beat writer. You can take any job and turn it into a prison. That's when you should probably get out. So yeah, it really is about the love of the game. It really is, because a great example is Randy Jeslierli, who's one of the founders of Baseball Prospectus, and in his secret identity is a dermatologist. Yeah, he wasn't that when he started. How old was he when you guys started?
Well, I met Randy. He was an undergrad at Johns Hopkins. I can't speak to it. I apologize. And I guess when we started BP, he must have been at Michigan. He was in med school at Michigan.
Right. He was a post.
By the way, he was 11 at the time.
Yeah, he's the youngest board certified dermatologist in Chicago or something like that. So he went through it really fast. But the point is, you could walk away at that point, but he's still here. Everybody has other things, other options they could be doing. Joe may get right the Great American Novel one of these days, or something like that.
If baseball goes away, I'm going to be the guy serving the shrimp scampi at Yankee Stadium.
So that's the thing. It again, like Joe said, not to get old and everything, but it is what you make of it. And there's a great Casey Stengel quote, which I wrote a book about Casey Stengel. He kind of lives in my brain, so he's always saying stuff to me. And he said, some people have bad luck all their lives. You make your own luck. And it's the same thing. or to be more collegiate literary, as John Updike wrote in one book, the secret is you imagine your life and then it happens. And that's what sort of what I could sing now. This is what Baseball Prospectus is. Anyway.
This is actually, I really need something like this in my regular life where it forces me to stop for 3 seconds before I speak. Really be very useful. As I said, we usually we talk a lot more than we typically do. It's not like either one of us really needs to be prodded to speak for 4 minutes extemporaneously, but I do want to throw it out. I mean, I know we've got the season coming up. I don't know if people have questions about the book, the website, how many people he's killed. I mean, look at this outfit, guys. But no, anybody want to kick it off? You keep, by the way, you keep throwing me. You keep adjusting the camera. I think you're raising your hand. That's recording. Oh, you want to say?
I'm going to run around.
Yeah, absolutely. So.
Right. I had a question about it, not specifically about like the photo, but do you ever come up with some stats and then not really just kind of come up with them and go, that doesn't make any sense? Or
I'm reasonably sure you're not going to answer this question.
No, bro. Turn it on for you already, so you should be ready to go.
Fed dates like that. The question, I don't know if people heard it. You're calling a stat and going, oh, that was stupid. Not being Buster Olney, it doesn't happen as often as you might think. I did something a couple of years back. I thought maybe there was something to the gap between the number of walks a team took and the number of walks that they allowed. I called it the walk gap. I devoted 3,000 words writing it, defending it, answering email about it, and it's a dumb stat. It doesn't tell you anything. All stats are useful if they tell you, if they correlate with winning. That's really all you're looking for. Does this correlate with run scoring, run prevention, and winning, which comes out of those two things? The walk gap correlated with nothing but my own ego and my desire to be sabermetric. The answer is yes.
You know, I think what does happen more typically, I think Joe will agree with me on this, is that after you've done this for a while, you get to looking at a team's performance and you start seeing certain clues and certain markers that would suggest to you that the team is doing something successfully or not successfully to account for their record. And you might say, like, boy, you're looking at the Marlins and Alfredo Amazaga has stolen 10 bases and caught 12 times or something. And you say, boy, you wonder if the manager is just not paying attention to the running game and the Marlins are giving away a lot of outs. Or you might say, yeah, I bet the double play rate has some influence on the record. And so you form a hypothesis in your head, and it's not, you don't necessarily invent a new stat to go along with it, but you consult the existing stats, and then either your surmise is validated or invalidated. And you may find, before you actually make it to the computer and get your search done, that you become fairly convinced that your hypothesis is correct, and that you're already writing the article in your head. Here's 1,000 words on why the Marlins run into extra outs, and then you find out once you do the search, somehow they're the 3rd most efficient base running team or something. And then, and this is the really depressing part, you've blown however much time you spent developing that, and you still have a blank page to deal with. So it's not so much reinventing the wheel and then finding out that there are already wheels, as opposed to finding out that the wheel doesn't really fit what you're trying to do.
Just one other point.
It was a great, the thing Joe was saying about needing a microphone in his personal life. Mark Twain had a great line where he said, if angry, count to 10, and if very angry, swear. The microphone would have that purpose.
I get very angry all the time, I guess. Sometimes writing that art, okay, I have an hypothesis, and by the way, data is a very mean thing. Data will beat you down because it will tell you that you're wrong. It just won't really care about your feelings. You'll write the article in your head, the data will not support your hypothesis. Writing that can actually be interesting. So I've written articles where I'm like, this is a really great idea. And then I asked Bill Burke to run the stats, and it shows that, once again, Joe Sheehan shouldn't do stat work. But if you write that, at least it's the process, and it's an interesting thing. Let me tell you one other thing. The difference between Baseball Prospectus and mainstream baseball writing is that Baseball Prospectus will go, here's my hypothesis, here's the data shows my hypothesis is wrong, therefore I will dismiss the hypothesis. Mainstream baseball writing is, I have a hypothesis. No matter what the data shows me, we're gonna run with it. Everybody remember the 2005 Chicago White Sox? 2005 Chicago White Sox, the storyline was they're playing small ball and running and bunting and stealing, and they've got spirit and heart and a manager with an accent. The Chicago White Sox scored more runs on home runs than I believe was just about every team in baseball. Didn't matter. I wrote that every week. I actually had a macro for it. And I just wrote it every week, right through the World Series. Nobody cared. The data didn't drive the story drove the story. And that's one of your key differences. And now I'll just point to Prospectus. I'll talk to anybody who's trying to do objective coverage of sports, politics, anything you want to talk about. Data doesn't drive the story. What's the Levitt book? The Little Orange One. Thank you. The one that still sells. I loved it for that reason. The data drove these interesting little nuggets. Next question.
You guys touched on Joe Morgan, so I'll continue on that. Because I know when I listen to Morgan and watch baseball tonight, I get frustrated because it's the biggest biggest baseball show in the world. It's 5 biggest intelligent baseball guys. So in-house, I assume you guys get frustrated with the coverage they get, the popularity they get. How do you guys kind of deal with that? And in-house, how do you talk about that?
You ever see the Beatles movie Hard Day's Night? There's a scene where George Harrison is asked by an ad man to evaluate this model that they're trying to pitch to the teenagers of the day, and they say, George, what do you think about this? And he says, we turn down the television and say rude things about it. It's a lot like that. I don't think I talk back to the television until that, and I honestly often watch games with the sound off. Well, it depends who the radio guy is. And this may get back to New York, so I'm going to stop there. Because I may be on the same payroll with some of these people. But the thing that I remember, it somehow sticks in my mind more than anything else when Joe was talking about that the media forms a narrative and then just goes with it. And again, and this goes to what I was saying before, once you're aware about this in sports, take a look at politics. And again, I'm not going to cite anything specific because that's not what we're about today, but it's the same idea. Like, they take a very complex situation and label it in a certain way and run with that, and the complexities get lost. But I remember there was one, I think it was an opening day kind of thing, where the Rockies and the Padres played in Monterey, where they, and Dante Bichette was still with the Rockies, and he hit a home run in that game. And Joe Morgan went on for paragraphs about how, I don't care what the stats say, this man can hit anywhere. And I mean, Dante Bichette had been around a good 10 years at that point. I mean, there was a lot more, you could be more convinced on a casual basis, knowing nothing about anything, that Dante Bichette could not hit everywhere, than you could be say that cigarettes cause cancer. I mean, it was such an act of denial, like, gravity, not real. That stuff, it drives me nuts. And again, not because it's Joe Morgan, not because, I hold these guys to having a particularly high standard, but it's just disinformation. It makes everybody dumber. And it goes to a lack of preparation. So, that's my reaction anyway. I mean, I try to avoid it whenever possible. There are some guys I like. I have a higher tolerance for Tim McCarver than most of my colleagues, and but here's the thing. Here's the thing.
Keep it going, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you very much. When I first started, if you watched Mets games in the 80s, he was peaking then, and he was doing stuff that other people were not doing. The weird thing is now, people say like, I believe in this situation the next pitch will be a curve, and it never is. He's just wrong. But back then he was right. And he would do stuff in every Mets game. He'd say like, Kevin McReynolds is shaded 3.9 feet to the left of where he should be. And a hit would fall in that spot. And he did this regularly, like day in, day out, to the point that it actually really pissed off the Mets executives with him because he was felt to be hypercritical. I think at some point, first of all, there's no shame in getting old. There's no shame in moving past your peak. Not that Joe and I will ever get there. But I think that time passes and new flavors come in. But I sort of have a sentimental remembrance of that guy, so I tend to sort of kite along with him longer than I would with somebody else. But on the whole, my solution is to to just sort of stay away from it. One thing I've learned from Joe, there's a temptation to want to correct everybody, and
You're wrong.
like that. And you can make your living essentially, and some people do, just sort of writing about the stupid thing that they heard on the air yesterday or the dumb thing that they read in the newspapers. And there's value in that, but it's also the easy way out. It's much harder to try to come up with your own take on things and just try to advance knowledge as you see it that way than to tear down the misinformation. That should maybe be 10% of what you do, as opposed to 90%. So that's my take on it. Maybe Joe has something else to add.
Actually, your last 30 words or so are my answer. So, next question. Sue, are we a protected class?
I have a question. It has to do with the stat stuff, so hopefully you can answer this. My dad and I were talking about the book the other day, and we were kind of wondering about a lot of the top pitchers in the game. The win predictions seem a little conservative. You look at guys like Fausto Carmona, Josh Beck, stuff like that. They pick 15, 16 wins, and I understand not wanting to pick a guy to win 20 games because a lot goes into some luck and stuff like that goes into that. But why do the win totals tend to be a little conservative for some of the great pitchers?
Yeah.
Not even just win totals, pretty much everything.
Yeah, it is everything really.
The projections in the book are called weighted mean projections. PECOTA spits out a range of projections for every player that it does. 1,900. There are 300 players. They're actually baseball players not in this book, if you can believe it. So PECOTA spits out a range of projections, and they run on a percentage scale. So they were from 10% to 90%. So if we have a guy, just to throw numbers at it, who the weighted mean projection is 300 batting average, 10 home runs, and 50 RBIs. His 10% projection will be 235, 4, and 18, and his 90% projection will be double those numbers. The projection said any projection system is going to be heavily regressed to the mean, so you're already going to have a problem of everybody's going to kind of cluster. If everybody in Major League Baseball had an average season, the numbers would actually look like this. So nobody would win more than 16 games. We call it the National League, actually. Basically, everybody hit their 50% projection. That's actually what the numbers would look like. But that's not what happens. Some percentage of players are going to have out-of-their-mind years. Carlos Pena from the Devil Rays last year. I don't know what his 90% projection was, but it wasn't even what he ended up hitting. The guys who lead the league and stuff, be it wins, doubles, ERA, are going to be guys who play above that 50% projection. So everybody is 16 wins. Physically, 8 guys projected to win 16 games. 3 or 4 of those guys are going to play at 70 or 80%. They're going to have a peak season, they're going to play really well, and they're going to win 18, 19, 20 games. Those are going to be your league leaders and your signing awards. The guys who lead the league and stuff in a given year are the guys who have their best seasons. There are some players, Albert Pujols is very consistent at a very high level. And I think that the projections for a guy, for the very best players in baseball, Johan Santana, Albert Pujols, Alex Rodriguez, those are not going to be captured at all by this heavily regressed system. However, on the whole, across the board, PECOTA is going to be approximately 70% accurate. But I'm with you. If you look at the leaderboards in the back of the book, you're like, these numbers aren't high enough. The league leaders are going to be higher than that, and that's why. I really don't have a good way around that. I mean, I don't know if we could maybe do the leaderboards off a 70% projection. In other words, say the leaderboards are done based on if everybody has, these guys have good years, what they might look like. That's one way around it. But you're absolutely right. When you look at those numbers, they do look conservative.
I'm just glad we brought you and your dad back together after.
You guys did buy 2 books, right? You didn't share?
He lives on the other side. He lives on the other coast, so yeah, they get around.
Yeah, that's good. And you have friends, right?
Yeah.
Relatives. Makes a great Christmas gift.
I told you he's right. He was next.
Obviously, one of the more eye-opening projections this year is Tampa Bay to win 89 games. Obviously, it says in the book about the much improved defense along with Garza and McGee and Davis. I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit more about the Tampa Bay projection?
Well, the projections for record are sort of an aggregate. As you know, or as not everybody in the room may know, record correlates to generally runs scored and runs allowed. So once we figure out sort of what everybody's going to do individually and look at their playing time, you tally that up and you get the team's won-loss record. It's just really a question of improving talent. For years, for example, I mean, they just tried to wedge B.J. Upton into the infield. And if you go through baseball history, and humbly I did this on a website, and look at guys who had that profile, that defensive profile, who came up from the minor leagues with that kind of error rate, no matter how young they were, it never works. Those guys always move to the outfield. I think the Brewers did kind of a brave thing this year. Some people would say they were premature, but I think it might be just recognizing reality to just say, you know what, Ryan Braun, out of the bull, you're going to left field. We can do, we lost games that, in a tight race because we were doing this. So, I mean, things like that, just sort of dealing in reality instead of what Christina Carl calls wish casting, will improve things. Again, if Casimir's healthy, which he seems to be now, if those pitchers that you mentioned kick in, the new shortstop that they acquired from the Twins, Mr. Bartlett, all of because Brendan Harris. Should I mention the email? No, maybe I shouldn't. Okay.
We've not confirmed or denied that.
Yes. Like I said, people write letters. Jason Bartlett is not Hans Wagner, but he should be a reliable glove there. They haven't really had that in a while. You just add up all these little things, and the record starts ticking up. Now, I mean, again, there could be, conservatively a 5-game swing in either, probably not to the high side, but to the low side, it could happen. I mean, somewhere between 500 and a few games over that. I don't think it's that shocking. What's shocking about it is that you're coming from a team that's just been the doormat of the league for so long that there's an instinctive reluctance to embrace that kind of projection. But they have really come a long way, and they have the depth. And not only that, they've got reinforcements coming along. Because Neiman might not make the opening day, but almost certainly won't make the opening day pitching staff. David Price just got demoted yesterday, and he'll probably start the season in some town you've never heard of. But by the All-Star break, could be knocking on the door. I mean, I don't know that it'll happen that fast, but it could. And this is a key, I think, for a lot of teams. And there's a study to be done in terms of, in the old days, like the 1927 Yankees famously didn't make a roster move all year. They finished the season with the exact same guys that they started with. Today, teams are a lot more fluid, and it would be interesting to correlate success with the number of call-ups that teams made, or the kind of contributions they got from players who came along mid-season. Somehow you'd have to sort out the 110 lost teams that were just trying player after player after player. But I mean, the Red Sox actually last year were a great example of this in that they were able to plug in Jacoby Ellsbury. They were able to reinforce and improve as the season went on, and the Devil Rays finally have the ability to do that. You want to add anything?
When you said a town nobody's ever heard of, you didn't mean Tampa, did you? Just checking. This process started last year. Devil Rays started last year. Mentioned B.J. Upton was trying to play second base. They had Brendan Harris, who's a second baseman / third baseman, playing shortstop. Murray's good at third. Pena wasn't the starting first baseman for a while. They had Delman Young playing center field, which is just wrong. Carl Crawford's a good left fielder. They had Johnny Gomes. It was a horrible defense. In season, they actually improved it considerably just by moving Upton off of second base into center field. So the improvement in the defense that you're going to see this year is actually a continuation of a process they started last year. They value defense. They picked up Bartlett. It's turning over the bullpen as well. Caleb Pfeiffer did an article for our site about the new relievers. They had one of the all-time worst bullpens last year. Some of that is defense, pitchers, guys behind the pitchers, but it was a bad bullpen too. So it's incremental improvement of the pitching and the defense, and then development of young players. I don't think they're going to win 89 games. I think if they sign Barry Bonds, they can win 89 games. Yeah, I mean, then it's a realistic possibility. They're not going to score quite enough runs, not going to prevent quite enough runs. One other thing, predictions are, I mentioned Hepakota. what you're seeing is the midpoint of a range of predictions. Do that with team predictions as well. If somebody's saying the Mets are going to win 83 games, they probably mean the Mets are going to win somewhere between, for me, I use the 7-win range, so what would that be, 80 to 86? It's kind of the midpoint of a range when you're talking about stuff like that. It's just implied. So the Devil Rays, if they blow it all out, could win 89 games. More likely, I think they finished up 500 though. And I mean, don't they always come up here and give you guys hell? I seem to remember every Devil Rays Red Sox game is like the Devil Rays go up 6-1, and Casimir can't get out of the fifth, and you guys end up winning like 13-6 or something. It just seems like you guys play the same game every single time. And all the games in Tampa feature brawls. Ladies and gentlemen, Mark Normandy.
Awesome.
Mark is one of you people. He's from Earth. No, he's a Boston native, right? He's actually been in the room for about 3 years now. Was writing some of our, we used to do these features called triple plays, and I'd say that Mark was really one of the best writers to come out of that project. One of the reasons we did this, so we'd have people come in and do writing. Mark, and I don't know which of the toaster blogs you were involved with. I don't want to get that wrong. Sports Blog Nation, it wasn't Toaster. Do you still write over there? Mark was an active blogger with Sports Blogs Nation. We pretty much have him to ourselves now. Do you do any of the work? Do you finish all the work for the Sun?
Yes.
Mark contributes to the New York. I don't know him very well, apparently. Mark contributes to the New York Sun, the relationship we have down in New York with the 6th paper and a 3-paper town. We're working on it though. One of the things I like best about Mark's work is the player profiles he does for the website. It's just a different way of taking all the collected information about a player and kind of putting it into a package that says, okay, this is who this guy really is. Mark's been very active working with some of the new data that's available from MajorLeagueBaseball.com, the PitchFX system. And he also was a contributor to the Baseball Prospectus 2008. And I got nothing. So, sorry, next question.
Hi, being an A's fan, I guess kind of going along with that, I'm a huge Billy Beane fan, and I was wondering if you had any take on both Moneyball as a book and as a resource for the stats that it had, but also the system that Paul DePodesta created, and if that had any actual, if you have any guide about if that actually works, what do you feel about that?
First of all, just checking here. Everybody know what Moneyball is? Michael Lewis's book about the way the Oakland A's run their team. You mentioned you're a Billy Beane fan, and I just think that's an interesting phrase just because there was no such thing as a fan of a GM 20 years ago. I think the Rays consciousness, both the role of the general manager has changed, they've become more prominent, and people like us have, decided to make them the focus as opposed to the field manager. I've never had access, I've never seen the stuff that Depot did for the A's in terms of evaluating defense. I've never seen the system, I can't evaluate it for you.
No, you got it.
There was another sub-question there. Tag.
You're talking about, you want to know about the book itself?
Well, no. I mean, back when the book was written, it was kind of written as almost like a Bible, the thing people should follow because it was the next big thing. But now there's been a lot more recent literature about how he was completely wrong about everything that he was talking about. Like the Jeremy Brown experiment totally failed, and things like that. They were looked upon when it was written as these revolutionary ideas that were going to hit big, and now it's kind of nobody cares. And I was wondering if you had any statistical perspective on that.
What Moneyball was an entertaining book about the way one group of people were trying to approach running a baseball team, doing it a bit more like running a typical business, trying to introduce reality-based management of a baseball team. It got reduced down to OBP is good, and fat catchers are drafted in the 2nd round, and all kinds of these things that were easy to take shots at. Moneyball's become a flashpoint, to the point where Moneyball, the word, has lost all meaning. Moneyball means whatever the speaker wants it to mean, and all it is a book by Michael Lewis. As far as the changes that have happened, it's interesting that even at the time the book came out, the A's had completely changed. The A's were no longer the Jeremy Giambi in center field, no defense, try to slug the ball. The A's had become a pitching and defensive team by the time they come out. And the point wasn't that you should always draft college players, which is one of the principles in the book, or you should always draft on base percentage. It was, you just need to approach the problem. You can't have a set of rules. You have to be thinking about the problem all the time. So the A's have adapted. The A's don't draft all college players anymore. They draft high school players. To mention one of the myths that you just alluded to, the A's 2002 draft wasn't bad. Martin was regular for the Kansas City Royals. I'm going to forget some of the other players. Nick Swisher, of course, he's with the White Sox now. Jerry Brown, you know, as draftees go, didn't have such a bad career. He made the major leagues. He actually was a decent hitter. He actually didn't retire because he's no good, despite the article that came out in the Times. He actually retired at some personal reason. It's entirely possible to come back to baseball. The point isn't that these are the rules for running a baseball team. The point is that there are no rules for running a baseball team. You have to constantly adapt. And if you've read, what I love about Moneyball is it introduced me to Michael Lewis. And I went back, I got to read Liar's Poker, the new thing, and I gained an appreciation for how you approach problems. So I think that's really the lesson of Moneyball, not the details. We got lost in the details. So whenever you hear somebody, particularly somebody say 10 to 15 years older than us, with a job with a major newspaper say Moneyball, just ball it up and throw it out. Come on, Rebecca, you insulted the Yankee fan. Move her around.
Hey guys, I was wondering if you could comment on, more recently the use of performance-enhancing substances, and how much is that, if at all, has that hurt you guys, your stats and the credibility of your predictions because of each of those?
The other day, a New York Times writer called me up to talk about the book, and he said, so where in your stats do I find the proof of performance-enhancing drugs being used? And I said, you don't. And he said, surely it must be there. I said, no, there is no discernible effect. And if you think about it, the kind of guys who typically have been found to be using this stuff were bad. Even if I did think that they got better, of which there's no proof, 1% better than bad is still really bad. It's just not there. And he's essentially said, I don't believe you. Can I talk to somebody else? So I had one of my colleagues, Jay Jaffe, who's been doing this sort of on media all over the country, giving this sort of, empirical, like where's the empirical evidence of this stuff, answer to people. And Jay Jaffe called him, and he said, I don't believe you. Can I talk to somebody else? So I called Nate Silver, who is the executive vice president of Baseball Prospectus, and a much smarter person than me and Jay put combined, and said, can you call this guy? And he called him. When the article came out, it had basically boiled down to, well, they say it's not there. They don't have the proof. I mean, he just, as the Simon & Garfunkel song goes, a man hears what he wants to hear and disregards the rest. That's the boxer, by the way, not the baseball player. But it's not there. And I think one of the really interesting things about say, the sort of two poster boys for this whole complex, Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens, is that they almost are, they put the lie sort of to the whole ability to generalize about this. Because if there is an effect, if they did reap a benefit from it, one, it's not necessarily, certainly in Clemens' case, it's not necessarily discernible from the statistics. Bonds has this one ridiculous outlier of a season where he, shatters the home run record and jumps up and down in the pieces. But otherwise, he was still the greatest ball player in the business before that. And his 1992 and 1993, 1994, that period was as good as anything anybody had done in the history of the game. Ted Williams, Babe Ruth, Mickey Mantle, whoever you want. So, did he reap a benefit? Again, you can't prove it. One thing that Will Carroll at BP has taught me is that there has never been a human test, and there never will be, because it's not ethical to do it. You can't take, 5 baseball all-stars and then, or 10 baseball all-stars and split them into 2 groups and shoot up half of them and, let the other guys get a placebo. That's never going to happen. There's a great book that one of our colleagues from Cliff Corcoran edited by Howard Bryant, called Juicing the Game, and there's a section about a professor up at Dartmouth who was giving steroids to guinea pigs. And you learn that guinea pigs are actually one of the most territorial animals in the world, but because they're guinea pigs, nobody notices. You know, a guinea pig wanders into another guinea pig's territory and they just sort of whimper at each other. It's indiscernible from normal guinea pig behavior. Well, this guy would shoot them up with steroids, and then when a guinea pig wandered into the steroidal guinea pig's territory, it was like kill or death guinea pigs, and they, you know, you had little guinea pig parts flying everywhere, claws and teeth. But he was shooting them with adult doses. He was giving little animals this big as, you know, as much as a 200-pound man would get. So I mean, I'm not sure what that proves, but if it takes, you know, that much to amp a guinea pig, that Barry Bonds is rubbing this stuff on his thighs or whatever, I mean, it just, the whole thing is kind of implausible. So it seems certain that a lot of players are doing it. If it seems to me that if the Mitchell report basically managed to find two guys who were distributing essentially the Mets and the Yankees, and didn't find anybody associated with the other, or very few people associated with the other 28 clubs, it's very possible those 28 guys had their own sources for that. So I think it's safe to extrapolate and say a lot of guys were doing it. But again, were they doing it in a way that worked? Does it work at all? What does it do? Like you see in the media all the time, I've had people say like it improves your eyesight. Like, well, actually I can tell you because I've had eye disease. I've taken steroid shots right to my eye about 20 times. It does not help your vision. It hurts like hell. It's disgusting, but it doesn't do it. You know, it helps you recover quickly. Again, these are things that are not based in any fact. It's just stuff that they decided. And again, and not to go on about this forever, because I feel like I already have, but I mean, maybe you know, you can give it to the East German you know, shot put team, and you will turn the women's East German shot put team into the East German men's shot put team. But does it help you line up a fastball? If it adds 0.5 miles, I don't think there's anybody who says it's going to add 10 miles to your fastball. If it adds 0.5 miles to your fastball, does it help you get the fastball into the zone, which is the harder trick? None of these questions have been answered. And it sounds wussy to give that answer because everybody wants you to be puritanical and everybody wants to lead a grand crusade for the cleanliness of the game, and yet I would like to know just who the witches are and what they did before we start burning witches. And I think that's, you know, represents, you know, pretty fairly Baseball Prospectus's take, which is, you know, we'll take up arms against this horrible cheating thing, you know, when we know what it was and how it worked and we have some proof of it. So, and by the way, when you give that answer, then people come back and say, well, it was against the law, so they should be prosecuted on that basis. They used drugs without a prescription. Well, come on. We don't run people out of the game on the road. We don't amend the baseball encyclopedia because you know, Jason Giambi borrowed some cold and flu medicine from Chuck Knobloch or something, you know, without a prescription. I mean, maybe those things are. Yeah, well, exactly. I mean, there are a lot of players. I mean, you know, that were incredible alcoholics or racists or all bad guys. There are guys in the Hall of Fame who are convicted of all kinds of horrible things. I don't even know if I've answered your question, but I mean, it's just such this huge, vast topic with very little of a factual nature in it. So, like I said, I you know, before we inaugurate the new McCarthyism, I'd like to actually, you know what it is that we're doing. Mark, do you have anything to add to that? Yes. Okay, maybe we could just move on. Next.
I think we might need to wrap up in order to have some time for book signing, which copies of Baseball Prospectus are for sale in the back.
Can we take like a couple more? Because I saw a bunch of hands and then we'll wrap up. We'll try to keep these last answers concise.
Okay,
Is
all right.
that-
We'll take a
break.
break.
Two more quick questions.
Two more quick
And then we
questions.
want to give you guys time to like interact with your fans.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, my books. My books.
That was a beautiful reframe. Thank you very much.
I wanted to ask you guys about Dusty Baker's recent comments about Votto and Dunn taking less pitches, and if Pacoda or Baseball Prospectus takes account different manager styles and team philosophies when making the team projections.
Do I have to? Really? Because I can just quick concisely. Dusty Baker was a terrible hire. The Cincinnati Reds are a team based around young talent. Dusty Baker doesn't handle young talent. Dusty Baker handles veterans. Dusty Baker doesn't like guys who take pitches. The Reds have guys who take pitches. Dusty Baker hurts young arms. The Reds have young arms. This is not going to end well. This is like putting me in charge of a nuclear reactor. It's just not going to end well. It's in Cincinnati. Nobody will care. There was a second question there.
Well, do you take into account manager styles and team philosophies when doing player projections?
Well, Pacoda doesn't.
No.
If we're going to deviate from Pacoda because you should never let your system drive your thinking, yeah, I mean, I can know that whatever I thought about Joey Votto before the day Dusty Baker was hired is irrelevant now. But Pacoda doesn't know for managers.
I just wanted to ask about the why you guys, and I'm sorry, I know these are supposed to be succinct answers, so keep it that way if you can. But why you guys got into this field of writing, like because I really want to work in the game of baseball. I enjoy writing, I enjoy reading, and all that goes with it. So I was wondering if you guys how you guys got into it, and does it provide you the access to the games that may go with that kind of privilege? Like, do you get to go to a lot of games?
You mean free tickets?
Or I mean, access. You guys keep referencing the room, you know, where you and your colleagues collaborate on this book, and you know, is it more of an analysis at the Prospectus? Is it more of an analysis-based business, or do you guys actually go to the field and talk to the players and have the access that a lot of people might dream about having?
All of the above. It's going to the games. It's as I said before, for people like Kevin Goldstein who want to evaluate prospects. He said this in a chat very recently. When you're looking at guys who talk about prospects, find out who they talk to, which was a very pointed reference. If you talk to Kevin, I mean, he was thinking of some fairly well-known people in that field. Like I said, he talks to the scouts all the time. Sometimes there's value in not doing that because you're just sort of doing an analytically based thing. Yes, it leads to access. That access again is, I hate to rain on your parade, but I mean for me anyway. Once the initial novelty of like, boy, I'm a kid and I'm in. I feel like a kid because I'm in this locker room and what the heck am I doing here? You know, what am I doing in the Yankee Stadium clubhouse? This is weird. And oh God, don't look there. That guy's not wearing any pants. You know, like I said, there can be for some players are very eager to talk to you. Some players there's a certain level of hostility. General managers, same kind of deal. It's like any other field of life. Some guys are good at communication and some guys are not. Why did we get into it? I think as Joe said earlier, there's a love of a game. If you're a writer, you have a need to write and communicate and entertain people. And for me, certainly there was that intersection of I knew from a very young age that I would write for a living. And when I read Bill James, there was kind of a window that opened up for me somewhere in the early 80s. I've written about other things. I will continue to write about other things, but this is what I've become known for. So, I mean, that's sort of where life took me. Do you want to add something?
We got very lucky. A lot of people love what they're doing, a lot of smart people. We've got a lot of breaks along the way. I can't recommend the Baseball Prospectus business plan because it was hard work and serendipity and all that stuff mixed together. But as far as if you want to be a sports writer, write.
Yes.
The barriers to entry in this industry are as low as they've ever been because of the internet, because of blogs. And to be honest, if you want to write, write. Send stuff into Baseball Prospectus, send it into Hardball Times, send it into BIS or MLB.com or whatever. You want to write, write. Writing is a muscle. You exercise it every day, you get stronger.
And the access will come, but don't do it because you want the access. That's putting the cart before the horse. I mean, this is not a way to, humbly, Baseball Prospectus does very well for itself. The people who are involved with it do very well for themselves. But for most people, writing is not a way to get rich. It's not a way to get known. It's not a way to get anything except a lot of frustration. Like Joe said, we have been very, very lucky. And if you have a love for it, I would never discourage anybody from trying to do the kind of thing that we do. But if you're getting into it for other reasons, to meet girls, to meet baseball players, to be movie stars, whatever, you're going to have a lot of frustration in life.
Speak for yourself, the group is a killer. You make us get mad, folks. Thank you very much.
Thank you.